I wanted to start off by saying congratulations on such an amazing documentary. I watched it once and then I watched it again with my wife because it was such an amazing doco that I wanted her to see it as well. So congratulations.
Well, that's wonderful to hear. Thank you. I know that's a sincere compliment. You
So
got your wife involved.
yeah, we're both animal lovers, and she spent some time around elephants as well. So yeah, it was a great film for her to be able to watch. I wanted to ask, when did the idea for this documentary first start for you? When did the journey start?
The journey started with a Kickstarter, David, that I did called Do Elephants Go to Heaven? And I went to South Africa with the intention of working with an animal communicator. I've seen their work in action and believe that they can communicate. And I went to Elephant Sands to get B-roll. And when I arrived, I was amazed to see all the elephants there. And at first I thought, this is a terrific, fantastic, all these elephants. And after I was there for a couple of weeks, I started realizing that it was a very dire situation. And there was an elephant that had arrived, Benny, who had an injured foot. And he more or less showed the foot to the people at the lodge, and then they started their journey to help him. And at that point, I decided that this was a more important documentary and that I needed to let people know what was happening with the 60% of Africa's elephants that journey to Botswana.
Now, I was wondering if you could tell our listeners a little bit about that, because, of course, I learnt it watching the film. Could you tell our listeners a little bit about what happened with Botswana and how 60% of the world's population of elephants ended up there?
Yeah, there was the president of Botswana at that time was named Ian Khama, and he was quite a revolutionary leader in animal rights. He banned all hunting and all caging of animals. You couldn't even cage an animal. And somehow, we don't know how, but somehow elephants communicate with each other, and the word went out, and all the surrounding countries, Botswana is surrounded by 5 African countries, they all banded together and migrated to Botswana. And that's how, you could hardly, elephants were everywhere.
No, wow.
And they came because there was no hunting. That situation has sadly changed now, but that was the situation then.
Now, you have an interest, as you said earlier, in animal communication. Is that the first time in history where it's ever been recorded of communication encouraging animals to all head for one area?
No, there wasn't an animal communicator involved in that. That was just the elephants. Somehow, I don't know how, they, just like if there's a wildlife corridor, the animals figure out that that's a protected zone and they'll start using that corridor. Somehow the elephants communicate. They're not sure if it's with sound waves or nobody knows, but they just figured it out. Yeah. They're quite intelligent beings, sentient beings.
So tell us a little bit about what it was like for you going to Botswana to make this documentary. You mentioned that things have changed now and that hunting is back on the table. Tell us a little bit about what it's like in Botswana now and what it was like when you were there making the documentary.
When I arrived, at Elephant Sands, the bush camp that was originally established by the Mari and Ben Moeller, it was a very relaxed environment. There was no aggression from the elephants. I really believe they knew that the family was trying to help them. Of course, there was the times when they were so desperate for water that they would, break into a chalet and flush the toilet to get the water to run or turn on a tap. But, one day I was sitting at the lodge and some tourists came up to Ben and said, there's a big elephant in our path to our room. And these elephants, David, you can't believe the size until you're right there next to them. There were big buses that came in with big, huge tires for the sand. They were towered above the buses. They're just enormous. And Ben said to them, oh, no, just go ahead, go to your lodge. They'll just move. But now the elephants are surrounded, the whole 1.1 million hectares of land surrounding Elephant Sands has turned into hunting. Because of the new president. You can hunt an elephant for $80,000, and there's no hunting season. sometimes there's a like deer season. I think in the Midwest it's a few months, but in Botswana, 12 months of the year you can hunt an elephant. I think the quota is about 300 elephants. So they are going through very dangerous territory to get to elephant sands. They arrive quite stressed. They're very skittish. There's not, when I was there, it felt like someone sprinkled fairy dust over that camp. It was just such an incredible environment, although it was very sad because there just wasn't enough water for all the elephants. Sometimes they would stand by the trough for a couple days, the females, because the bulls, they would allow the babies to come and drink, but they wouldn't allow the females. So, it was a hard documentary to make because there was a lot of joy, but there was also a lot of sadness. And I tried to show the power of the human spirit, what the family did for the elephants and what they're continuing to do. And now Ben Moeller has gone to the Minister of Wildlife in Botswana, and they're asking for a wildlife corridor. So a 2-mile wide corridor where the elephants could get to their land, which is 16,000 hectares, but surrounded by 1.1 million hectares, all hunting.
Yeah.
So it's not good.
What do you hope that people take away from the documentary? Like, if people watch the documentary and want to help, is there any way that they can help the plight of the elephants in Botswana?
Yes, there is. I mean, I have raised money over the years for boreholes that are outside of elephant sands, because we try to get the boreholes, means watering sites, solar pumped water, which they want to get the elephants away from elephant sands, because that opening shot where it's so green, the whole camp, the drone shot, and then it turns brown and there's no trees, because they have to journey a long way to get the water, and then they eat everything. Then they have to journey far away to get to eat and then come back for water. So we spaced 7 boreholes with solar throughout the 1.1 million hectare. I mean, they were far away. But now, sadly enough, 4 of those boreholes are prime hunting areas, so we're no longer servicing them. But we are servicing a remaining 3, and we could build more if we had the money. So we need to upgrade. The 3 we have now, each borehole services 800 elephants, and for about $10,000 we can upgrade the batteries in the solar power, and then it would be about 1,600 elephants, and they could go to Elephant Sands on Facebook, and when they go to Elephant Sands, they'll see a big pool of water in front of the lodge if they go to Facebook, but that water's undrinkable. It's been sitting there, it's become stagnant, it's full of, feces and urine, and so, it's just undrinkable. They're all trying to drink from the trough. Or they can go to my website. There's a donation page there on my website, which is DOL, D-O-L, for Dream Out Loud, DOL Films, moviesfilms.org or .com.
Awesome. So, Louise, tell us a little bit about where your love for elephants came from, because I know for me, elephants were always an animal I'd had an interest in, but it wasn't until I went to Thailand and actually volunteered at an elephant refuge where they were rescuing elephants from the tourist trade that I absolutely fell in love with them. And like you said, they're such an amazing animal to be around. If you've ever looked into an elephant's eyes, you can't help but fall in love with the elephant. Where did your love for elephants first begin?
I travel between Seattle, Washington, and Africa. And here in Seattle, there's a zoo called the Woodland Park Zoo. And they've had elephants there for years and years and years. And I hate zoos and I rarely go, but there was a very active community here trying to free those elephants. And I went a few times and visited them, and they're, it was so overwhelmingly desperate and sad, and they kept trying to impregnate the elephant, and she finally did have a baby, and then I brought an animal communicator to talk to them, and they expressed their terrible sorrow, and the mother was so sad that she had a baby because she didn't want the baby to grow up in a zoo, a tiny little zoo. And then I was also involved in the Nosy rescue. Do you remember the story of Nosy? That was a circus elephant?
Yes, I do, yes.
Yeah, I had a communicator talk to Nosy, and that was such a that's on my YouTube channel. I did a video of the Woodland Park Zoo elephants and then Nosy, and that her story was so devastating, and it was just amazing that that group of activists finally freed her. Now she's living in Tennessee, having a good life. And I don't know why we have zoos anymore, David. I mean, you can watch everything on National Geographic or Discovery Channel. There's really no reason that zoos existed in the beginning in the 1800s
Yeah.
because there was no other way to see these animals, and they're just money-making machines. I mean, I really don't like zoos at all. And those elephants ended up dying at Woodland Park. They sold a couple of them, and it's just all about the money.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm surprised
Yeah.
more zoos haven't changed the way that they operate. I mean, we're kind of lucky here in Victoria. We've got one zoo here called the Werribee Plains Zoo, and I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it's basically an absolutely massive park, and where they have their giraffes and their zebras is acres and acres and acres and acres of land. It's like absolutely massive, to the point where Melbourne Zoo is now sending their elephants there so that they can have hectares and hectares and hectares of land as well. It's so big that you really have to use a bus to be able to see the animals, and I'm not sure why other zoos haven't realized that that format is the way to go if they care about conservation of animals. It's just
Well, I
beyond
can
me.
explain that.
Sorry?
I can explain that in one word: money.
Yeah.
They use conservation as a buzzword. They're not into conservation at all. They're into making money. Like the Seattle Zoo, they have the Woodland Park Zoo. That's their area. It's a nonprofit. The head of the zoo probably makes way over $250,000 a year. So where would they get land to build a new zoo?
Yep.
They don't. It's not. Yeah, they're not interested. They're not interested in conservation.
Definitely.
I mean, I think they're very anti-animal. Yeah, there's a zoo like that in San Diego, California, which is supposed to be wonderful. That they roam free.
Yeah.
That's the way it should be.
Yeah. So, Louise, what's your next project as a filmmaker now? Are you going to keep people updated with what's happening in Botswana? Because as soon as I finished watching the documentary, I was like, I need to know what happens in Botswana now going forward.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm trying to hire someone for social media to do that. I mean, there was a big lull between finishing the film and getting it out because of the COVID. The film festivals all went down, and it was just, kind of a disaster. My next project is I'm doing two things. One, I'm starting a sugar bean farm in South Africa, and working with local women and raising sugar beans, and then we're going to sell the beans, and the profits will go to the elephants in Botswana. And I'm working on a documentary called Animals Are Talking. Once again, back to my love of communication with animals. And that information is on my website. We're both basically focusing on baboons and horses.
Wow. Well, Louise, we cannot wait to see your next documentary as well. But for now, to finish off, what would you like to say to people out there who are about to sit down and watch Elephant Refugees?
Thank you. I appreciate you sitting down and watching it, and I think you'll laugh and you'll cry, and I hope become inspired to, even if it's just helping animals in your area, because they are sentient beings.